And the question was, even to Pons and Fleischmann then, what is causing this heat? Now, of course, the establishment didn't even accept the fact, nor should they have on day one, that there was more heat coming out by far than electricity going in.
All right, I'm old enough to remember the announcement, and what I remember following it was a whole group of institutions across the country trying to replicate, which is science,
yes,
the experiment they did, with very mixed results. Some institutions came back and said, yes, we've done it. Others have said, it's failed. It doesn't work. And there was a great controversy that ensued.
Yes, indeed. That is exactly what happened. There was a tremendous controversy because of the claim that nuclear reactions, potentially nuclear reactions, occurring on a tabletop was a very shocking claim to be making.
Sure.
If they had not been, by the way, the world-class chemists that they were, Dr. Fleischmann is a fellow of the Royal Society, Stanley Pons was head of the University of Utah chemistry department, they wouldn't have even been listened to. I mean, it would be the usual crank business,
sure,
unsupported by evidence, and that would be the end of it. Now, fortunately, they triggered a worldwide frenzy of activity, indeed, to replicate them.
They
and
sure
in fact,
did.
Many did. Many people rather quickly did replicate their claims.
All right, Doctor, hold it right there, and we'll come back and have more time to get into this in great detail. So if you really want to understand what's going on with cold fusion, keep it right where it is. I'm Art Bell, and this is CBC. Once again, here I am. It is a completely non-trivial topic. We are talking about our future. If you look at the pall of air hanging over our cities right now, no matter whether you're right, left, or whatever you are politically, you cannot be happy. That pall of air is coming from the use, or some might suggest misuse, of fossil fuels. If we don't do something about it, it's going to do something about us. And so we're talking about energy, an alternative form of energy, the real thing. If you want to really know what's going on, you won't budge from where you are right now. Back to Dr. Eugene Malov in a moment. Now, back to Dr. Eugene Malov. And I hope am I getting your name correct? Is it Malov?
Yes, that's a good, that's close. Most, Malov. You're right on target, Art.
All right. Good. Now, Pons and Fleischmann. Here we had the demonstration and the great controversy, some universities able to replicate, other universities saying they were unable to replicate.
Yes.
Where do we go from there?
Well, again, this was the spring of 1989. It seems like a century ago to us in the Cold Fusion War, but there it was. March 23rd, 1989 was the beginning of the worldwide race to discover whether or not Pons and Fleischmann were correct or not. They could have been mistaken because there was a lot of backroom infighting and complex political maneuvering that led to that press conference. They themselves did not want the press conference, by the way. They wanted to wait another 18 months. But due to controversies with another group in the state of Utah, the announcement occurred, for better or worse.
Was it a race?
Yes, it was a race for many people to get into it and find out who could be first, to either find out that they were having a correct observation in science, or whether they had made a terrible mistake and should be regarded as somehow fools. In any event, the establishments rather quickly, in weeks, came to its own private conclusion. They maintained a public veneer of respect for Pons and Fleischmann for a while, a little grace period. Mm-hmm. They said, well, look, let's check this out, and then major institutions such as MIT and Caltech and Harwell Laboratory in England were coming to the conclusion rapidly that Pons and Fleischmann had made a terrible mistake. And they wanted to prove to the world that Pons and Fleischmann should be gotten rid of. And, of course, there was this media flurry, a very large media flurry. The Cold Fusion story made the cover of Time, Newsweek, and Business Week on May 8th, 1989. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing is this. Many groups did get excess energy, some with difficulty, and even without guidance, people knowing something about electrochemical systems, were able to see the effect. It was weak at that time. It wasn't a major effect. It wasn't as extraordinary as it is today with some of the newer cold fusion systems, but it was there.
May I ask, were Pons and Fleshman at that time giving assistance to those universities trying to replicate the experiment?
They were giving some assistance. The lawyers that were responsible for guiding the way the announcement came out at the University of Utah did to some extent tie their hands. A lot of this was tied up in patent issues and so forth, as the university wanted to take some advantage of this, as it well should have. Excuse me. If, as Fleischman today would say, they did not take care to protect the rights of the University of Utah, they would subsequently have been considered a derelict in duty. Mm-hmm. But they did, in fact, give some assistance, and in point of fact, even in those cases where not much assistance was given, the effect was replicated. Now, the high-profile places, such as MIT, Caltech, Harwell Laboratories, and a number of other places that did rather quick work, claimed not to have gotten the effect. Now, today, this is of only historic importance, because those high-profile places, their results were very much used by the U.S. Department of Energy panel that was set up to investigate this as a certification that this was a terrible mistake.
All right, Doctor, in your best estimation, why did these high-profile universities, why were they unable to replicate the experiment?
Let's take the three prominent examples that have been used that were used then by the Department of Energy and still used in the mythology against cold fusion as to what was going on. Now, in the case of Caltech, they published, the Nate Lewis team published in Nature magazine extensive reports on their heat measuring experiment.
Yes.
It turns out that they published interesting data, very interesting data, except they analyzed it improperly. You know, in fact, if you look at it, high school algebra and common sense, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the complexities, indicate that it's fundamentally improperly analyzed. At worst, it's an ambiguous result. At best, there was some evidence of excess heat. Certainly, under no circumstances is that work to be regarded as a definitive negative. Well, again, this is all historical.
All right, well, and I want to hear the history. Would you characterize that report as a benign mistake or otherwise?
I don't consider it a benign mistake. Not when the subsequently to the publication of the Caltech result, several excellent electrochemists and chemists and engineers sent scientific correspondence to Nature magazine asking the ordinary question, look, we see some fundamental simple errors in algebra and other things in this report. We want to publish our letters that show the error that they have so that the record can be corrected. And Nature magazine, which was on the warpath against cold fusion at the time.
Why?
Well, there was a brouhaha. There was kind of a pack mentality, as so often occurs when a heretical new discovery is launched upon the world.
Boy, I'll tell you, I have never in my life. Scientists are some of the worst feuding bunch of professionals I've ever seen in my whole life.
They are. The problem with scientists, I must say, I consider myself more of an engineer, but a true scientist in spirit, certainly. They have a card that says, I am objective, but this is not true at all. We know that scientists act according to their emotions, according to their funding sources, according to their worldview of how the universe works. That's what was happening. And, of course, at MIT, where I was, and I had a better insight there, even more outrageous things happened, things that I did not even realize were happening until more than a year went by after the announcement. I was the chief science writer at the news office at MIT, responsible for reporting research from MIT, reporting the pro and cons that were going on about cold fusion at MIT. Now, their work was reported as negative. And in fact, it is not negative. To my great dismay, later in my investigation of what was happening,
yes,
and I was skeptical of cold fusion myself in the beginning.
Right.
Certainly, a year after, I was beginning to believe that it was almost certainly true. 2 years after the announcement, I said the evidence was overwhelming, and now it's 100% certain. But what I saw in the MIT data was